This paper was presented at the JCT Traffic Signal Symposium 2025. Video coverage of this paper is provided by Highways News and sponsored by Mobius Networks, AGD, Smart Micro UK, TRL Software, Traffic Group Signals, AD Electronics, and 4-Way Consulting.
Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you for inviting me here. Can I just check, a show of hands in the audience here, who works in traffic management in this august theatre? Do any of you work in? Yeah, okay. And nobody in the balcony put your hand up there. What? I don't know what you guys do, but anyway, who thinks they're making a positive impact on the management of traffic on our roads? Thank you. Right, okay, I'm here on behalf of the responsible motorists of this country, and we would just like to say thank you. So I'm going to ask you, give yourselves a round of applause. And while we're giving rounds of applause, I think we definitely need to give a round of applause to Mr. John Nightingale for arranging this 30 years on. Fantastic. John. Okay, John asked me to talk about something and challenge you a bit and think about the future. As Eric said, looking into the future is a bit of a mug's game. But here in the Royal Armouries Museum, the risk one always runs in thinking about the future is a bit like they say of generals, don't they? That generals are always fighting the previous war and not thinking about the next one. And thinking about the future, I wish I could tell you what the future is going to hold. And I wish I could tell you in detail what it's going to hold for you, for the sector that you work in. But what I thought I'd try and do is just pull out a few thoughts, really, pose a few questions and see how you feel about them as well. So I thought I'd use the RAC Foundation crystal ball. RAC Foundation, for those of you who haven't read your 1,000-page conference pack yet, we're not the Breakdown Boys, we're not the Members Club on Pall Mall, we're a little think tank that was set up by the Royal Automobile Club about 30 years ago to look into issues relating to motoring. So that's who we are, and we try to understand what's going on, and we try to think about what it all means from a policy perspective. And I thought, well, let's start here, which is in Leeds, and let's start thinking, what's the future going to bring in terms of traffic? So again, show of hands just quickly. Any people routinely drive a car in this audience? Any of you drivers? Yeah? Yeah, almost everyone, okay. Hands again. Who thinks they're going to be routinely driving a car in 10 years' time? Okay, so that was almost all of you. So I hear a lot about how young people, anyone here self-identifies young? Right? Not you. Capes, put your hand down. I keep hearing a lot about how driving is going out of fashion and how we're not going to drive anymore. Well, I think there's some interesting things here about the amount of traffic that we've got and how we're going to have to cope with it in the future. So I've got a few numbers here. I haven't got any graphs for you. I'm really sorry about that, but I've got a few numbers here. So there are 34 million cars licensed in the UK today. If I go back to a date that means something in particular to me, back in the 1960, about 5 million back then. We've had a massive growth in the number of cars. We've got massive growth in the number of vans. It's approaching 5 million vans are currently licensed for use. According to my friends at the DVLA, who admit this number is a bit flaky for various reasons, there's about 43 million people in this country have got a full driving license, and another 10 million stacking, as in they've got a provisional driving license. And anyone who knows anyone who's been trying to get a driving test recently will know that enthusiasm for getting a full driving license appears to be showing no real let-up. In most parts of the country, many parts of the country, you'll be waiting 6 months or more to get a practical driving test appointment. So the death of driving, I think, has been perhaps overstated. And what does that mean for you guys? What does that mean for the industry? Well, it means we're going to have to carry on thinking about better ways of coping With this, coping with, this is the end of day rush hour as it used to be in Leeds. This is actually a pre-COVID picture that I took. So I don't think we're going to see traffic going away anytime soon. What we have seen, interestingly, is a reduction in the number of trips that we're making and the length of trips we're making individually. So the Department for Transport does a national travel survey that has a look at that. And there's been a trend over the last 20 years that the number of trips has been edging down and the length of trips has been edging down, which has been more than overtaken by the increase in the population. So when we're thinking about these sorts of things, okay, we might be making fewer trips. Some people in white-collar jobs might not be going into the office every day. We might not have the same commuting patterns we used to. What does all of that mean? It means the future is uncertain because we don't know exactly how much travel is going to be, and we also don't know what that pattern is going to look like. If we've been having this conversation in 2019, I suspect the extent to which flexible working was a real thing was much, much less in all of the companies that you work in the civil service, where Darren is working and I used to work. I used to go into the office every day. In my company, we certainly don't do that. And if I wanted to recruit younger people, my latest recruit made it very clear they weren't going to be coming into an office every day if I wanted to recruit them. So we have a different pattern of working and a different pattern of demand on the network. So let's go back to our crystal ball. And let's just have a think about the implications of public policy. I've talked about how our working patterns have changed, but what about the politics here? Well, in addition to hearing about how young people don't want to drive anymore, but it turns out lots and lots of them do, I come across a lot of policies, particularly citywide, in the city of Leeds, for example. This one's the City of London, of restricting motor vehicles, perhaps cutting down on car use. Many of our metro mayors are very much against car use in our cities. In fact, cutting down on motor vehicles altogether. In fact, taken to its extreme, we might see vehicles eliminated altogether. Well, I doubt it, and certainly I would say in the fabulous city of Leeds, for anyone who's having a wander around yesterday before the very enjoyable reception we had in the evening, you'll have noticed not that many cars in the centre of Leeds. Some, not that many. Quite a few people on bicycles, microscooters, electrically boosted microscooters. And I have to say, showing, and I think this is extremely sad for people here today, John, a callous disregard for all of the traffic signals and the pedestrian stretches of the footway where they were not supposed to be, but very much were, I noticed, as they were whizzing around delivering pizzas and the like. What does that mean? Well, I just wonder. I hear a great deal about how we're not going to use cars in our cities, but when we think about cities, are we actually thinking about the places where people live? I think Leeds is quite interesting here because of the sheer number of apartment blocks I've seen developed over the last 10 years, and lots and lots of people clearly living there. Again, quick show of hands. Who lives in an apartment block? Very few of you. Who lives in, I don't know, a more traditional house, a couple of stories high? Right, most of you. Most of us live in suburbs. Most of us don't live in city centres, and in suburbs, most of us have cars, and most of us carry on using them. This is something I think our elected politicians locally and nationally need to keep thinking about. This is Tracy, the mayor for this part of the world, very keen on buses. I think it's quite interesting that at the metro mayor level, in particular in London, but across the country, we see quite a strong push on reducing car use in the built-up areas, reducing speed limits, all of those sorts of things. At a national level, by and large, I think I see a government that runs scared of a thing called the motorist. There's no such thing as the motorist, but they seem very worried about them. An interesting, not necessarily a conflict, but an interesting division of policy there about whether they should be accommodating car use, restricting car use, or even penalising car use. What does that mean for you guys? Well, I bring you back to that brute fact. In a country that's got over 30 million cars today and over 40 million people who think they have a perfect right in law to drive those cars. I don't think we're going to see that changing, that pressure for managing traffic on the network reducing really very quickly at all. But perhaps it will in our very city centres, and maybe that will spread to the suburbs. I'm not sure I can see it. Back to my crystal ball quickly, because I thought I'd just talk a bit about change. We've seen some changes going on. This is a really interesting time in the world of motoring, because we're seeing a transition away from fossil fuels. We're moving off from petrol and diesel, we're told. It's quite clear to me that national government policy is in favour of electrification, electric battery-powered cars. Some companies are still pushing hydrogen and alternatives, but realistically, you can see the government is gung-ho for electric. And that's one change that's coming. I'll come on to another one in a moment. But how quickly does change happen? Because I've often been told we went overnight, we went from being a horse-enabled society when it comes to travel to a car-enabled society. So I fished out some numbers on this about the horse population in the country over a number of years. And, oops, I've gone too quickly there. And the transition wasn't that quick. The main issue in the reduction of the number of horses in use in this country turns out to be the number of them we killed in World War I. We got through a lot of horses in World War I, and then invented tanks. Hurrah! So change takes time. Again, are we going to see a dramatic change in our demands of the road network over the next 5 years? I doubt it. 10 years, maybe. Go beyond that? Well, I'm not sure. We saw one of the slides earlier saying you need to have a strategic plan that looks out 15 years. Key thing to remember, of course, with any strategic plan is you need to be keeping an eye on what's actually happening, because those things can change. The politics can easily switch. So back to the crystal ball. And apart from Andy Graham, who is in the audience, I don't know whether anybody recognises this particular car or this particular fitment in this particular car. Not seeing any nods, so I'll tell you this is 19. Andy, this is 19. From what year? 1964. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Andy's normally on the money with these things. Anyway, what we have here is in-car sat-nav, okay, from 1964. It was a mock-up, we all know that. But we've got clever in-car stuff. We've got clever in-car stuff that is talking to me, the driver. It's telling me sometimes useful things, sometimes a bit less useful, sometimes up to date. But that's today. Interesting question. Where will that go? We were hearing a moment ago about the extent to which we're working off floating vehicle data, which is not yet perfect because connectivity hasn't necessarily yet reached a point where that data is as good as we'd like. Connectivity is definitely developing real time, real fast. Really hard to get a car, let alone a new car, that isn't actually a connected vehicle these days, and that is generating potential, not just in the information, of course, that's sent into the vehicle, but for the data that is harvested coming out of the vehicle. And of course, the great thing about that is there are auto companies all over the world who are harvesting that data and keeping it. We might just come back to that, but it'd be really good if more use could be made of it. Crystal ball number 5. Quick look here, because I said quite hard to get away from being in a connected vehicle. Some of us were actually engaged in making sure even the very oldest vehicles on our roads could be connected. This was a project we engaged in with Andy and some colleagues a couple of years ago to connect vehicles taking part in the London to Brighton run, and thinking about what is it really useful for the people taking part in the London to Brighton run to know, and what is it really useful for the people organising it to know. Because one of the things you really want to know, some of my friends actually organised the London to Brighton run, is where are these damn cars? And have they broken down again? And if they have broken down, can we get to them? Why? What's wrong with them? Are we going to be able to get them on the go again? Are we going to be able to manage the consequences? Data in, data out. The more that we think about this connectivity as a two-way flow of information, and ideally maximising the use of that information, the better. Looking ahead, number 6. Well, this is something that has actually been referenced in terms of national highways. This is our friend the gantry. Now, I have a personal hang-up about this because it's not about gantries per se, although I love them as I do. It was this headline I picked up from one of the journals not that long ago about the idea that the connected vehicle and the screens in your vehicle might mean that we don't need signs beside the road, signs, signals, gantries. We might not need them at all anymore. I put it to you, in my crystal ball, I'm looking ahead, and I have an example to give you, and this is the example I'm going to give you. Some of you will recognise this. This is a motoring event, I know. That's a railway station. And here's the thing about railway stations. Quite often, there's a lot of people there. They all have smartphones. The signal bandwidth in the station is not good enough for them all to get reliable information quickly on their smartphones all at once, particularly when things go wrong. But even if it was, they love a departure board. They love the triangulation. They love the fact that it's not just their piece of kit that's telling them something. They're all looking at the same information at the same time. I put it to you that the age of the gantry and the roadside sign and the roadside signal is very far from over. In fact, my prediction is it's not going to be over because we like that sort of thing. We like the reassurance it gives you. That's probably the nearest you're going to get to an actual prediction from me today. Okay, another thing that's changing and really sweeping across the world and coming to a place near you in 2026, I'm told by my friends in the Centre for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles, is the driverless vehicle, the autonomous car. In this case, the autonomous hail and ride cab. Well, what changes is that going to bring? Let's put to one side for a minute. There are all sorts of challenges about authorising the use of automated technology like this on our public roads. And we could debate those for the whole of the 2 days if we really want to. But let's just take for a second, it's coming, right? So what is that going to mean? Does that mean, as I am often told, that you, will all decide that you don't need to own a car anymore? The convenience of having that vehicle at your beck and call will be overtaken by the fact that you can simply, probably with your mobile phone or its successor, you can summon a vehicle whenever you want. That vehicle will turn up, you will, by some means or other, tell it where you want to go, and it will take you there. Why on earth would you want to own a car when that service is available to you? Well, maybe it will be available to you. I don't know. I don't know in that future world what we'll be using those vehicles for. There are various theories. For example, you could put your dog in the car and it could take itself for a walk. Maybe put your cat in the car, I don't know. Maybe in this world, we've talked about commuting, really long distance commuting could become a thing because you could get into the car at about 10 o'clock at night, travel overnight, go to work during the day, sleep in the car on the way home. I don't know. That seems quite unlikely to me. What I don't think this takes away, though, is junctions. Junctions are going to be with us because that's the way that roads are. And what are junctions but a cause of conflict? Now, I don't know what picture comes to your mind when you're thinking about motorists out on the road, about drivers out on the road. I might even ask you to think for a moment. The image that you have in your mind, your motorists, average, everyday drivers, out there in the suburbs of Leeds or accessing the National Highways network, coming up to a junction. How do they feel about each other? Well, this might be extreme, but I can honestly say I have very much recently taken to walking the dog just at the end of the school run in the town where I live. And that's how people seem to feel about each other and, frankly, about their own children some of the time. But very much they're in a dead hurry to get to the school drop-off, and then they're in a dead hurry to get on to the next thing. Now, maybe these very, very clever automated cars, driverless cars, maybe they will cope better than that because they won't have emotions. They won't have feelings. A driverless car is not going to be sitting there seething because Johnny or Janie didn't get their school uniform on time, or indeed that somebody else has nipped into the parking space that they wanted. But somewhere in the system, there has to be a control mindset, a controlling mind somewhere that is dealing with the priorities, that's dealing with junctions, that's dealing with the management of the traffic, whether it's automated or not. I have my suspicions that we will not all be giving up our private cars. Maybe we'll be getting TomToms instead to play. We won't be giving up our private cars. Perhaps we'll have fewer of them. Perhaps in a place like the very centre of Leeds, if you're living in an apartment block, you never will get a car. Or perhaps you'll grow up, have kids, move to the suburbs like everyone else does, and then you will. We're still going to need a way of coping. Right, 2 more to go very quickly, because I've got an amber light here. Cars are changing, as we've said. I just want to see, can anyone spot the difference between these two vehicles? Anyone want to call out the difference between these two vehicles? It's fairly obvious.
50 years.
50 years, yes. I was going to say one's red and one's yellow. Okay, so bubble car from the very early 1960s. My Uncle John had one of these. Amazing little thing. Microlino on sale now. So you could say cars have changed a huge amount since 1960. Actually, wheels, box, steering wheel, there's a lot that's still very similar. And if I cast my mind forward 20, 30, 40 years, I suspect there's going to be a lot that's very similar. Like I've said, you need to be thinking about that. Some things will change. Information flows will change. I suspect the vehicles will have some similarities. I'm told that the autonomous drone cab is a thing. Some of you will have seen footage, I'm not sure how real it is, footage of a couple of them colliding at a Chinese motor show a week or so ago. I personally cannot envisage the circumstances where I would get into one of those and let it fly me off to an appointment somewhere. I just can't see it. I don't like flying anyway. I sometimes wonder how I'd feel about getting into a Waymo driverless cab for similar reasons. I just can't quite see this. So that might be the future. I have to admit of it, but I doubt it. So I wish I could give you an accurate prediction of the future, like Sybil Trelawney in the Harry Potter films, a little cultural reference for some of you there. I wish I knew what was going to happen. I don't want to give you a bum steer because I don't know. I think there are all sorts of trends happening that will affect what you're doing. But one thing I particularly want to say, I can predict with absolute confidence, we are going to have to cope with I think the technical term is, sort of a lot more road and street works over the next 10 to 15 years than we've experienced over the last 10 to 15. Partly that's because of a backlog of work that we should have done and never got round to, and partly it's due to the fact that we have a network which, like me, is in its 60s and it needs work. The National Highways Network, a lot of structures need attention, a lot of street works, a lot of things buried under the carriageway need repair, need maintenance, need upgrading because we're going to build lots and lots of houses for the population that's going to carry on growing. And we, the motorists of this country, look to you to help us deal with this. If I was going to pick one thing that I particularly wanted everyone at JCT to think about, it is not just how you deal with the everyday, the growth in traffic, the management of the roads, the management of the junctions in Greater London, but how to cope with a national rash of roadworks and streetworks, temporary restrictions. How do we make the handling of those better, less intrusive, better, particularly for our logistics companies, where it can be a real nuisance? I have not mentioned something. You probably thought I was going to, but I haven't. This acronym, there's a few things I haven't had time to mention in the time I've had available today. I do not know what difference AI is going to make. As far as I can see, it will have an impact on your jobs because it will be able to do, as my English master at school was fond of saying, sums. And that's apparently all it can do, and can do them quite quickly. Hurrah. It should be a tool in your armoury, if you'll pardon the expression, I'm sure that all of your companies are thinking about it, and I'm sure you are all far better versed in what it can do for you than I am. What I did want to give you, put up here, was this acronym. Some of you will recognize this acronym. It has been used in your world before. I don't know if you immediately recognize it. It is garbage in, garbage out. I bring you back to the data. What we need is accurate data. The more we know about what's going on and why it is happening, the better able we are to react to it, to plan for it, and to move to a world where we have good information delivering a good outcome. That is the acronym I would like you to take from my presentation. Thank you for listening. That was all I was going to say.
You have managed your time extremely well. Again, with the qualification that they should be short. Any questions? Trudy.
Hi there. Right at the very beginning, you mentioned about electric cars versus hydro. Do you have a preference, and what do you think is, because you were saying that the government were very much pushing the electric, what's your view on what we should be doing?
I think that if I were back, so some of you will know I used to work with Eric back in the transport department. If Heidi Alexander walked in here now and said, what should I do? I would say your best bet is probably to carry on pushing the battery electric route, because we know that it works. It works well enough. I think I'd be foolish to say that synthetic fuel or hydrogen could not come along and surprise us all. A lot of money is being thrown at both of those options by companies that have more money to spend on it than we do as a national government. So in terms of national public policy, keep pushing on the electric, but keep an eye open in case those things come along and surprise us. After all, it's very hard to predict when technological breakthroughs will happen. Happily, they do happen. So I know a lot of people who are very keen on the thought that synthetic fuel will come along and save the internal combustion engine. Maybe that will happen. But if I was betting my own money or advising the government, I'd say go with electric.
I confess to reading Modern Railways, and one of the writers there is very cynical about what he calls bionic duckweed, saving the universe by generating hydrogen from ponds. Any other questions? Steve, thank you. You were asked to be challenging, and I think you have been. Oh, Margaret, yes.
More of a comment, really. In 2050, it's forecast that there'll be 80 million people in the UK. Today, it's around about 67 million. So my question would be, how can 80 million people make the same travel choices, mode choices as the 67 million today, because we don't have the capacity on the roads, and to meet the carbon and air quality targets, we do need to reduce the need to travel. So should we not, as a community, be looking at not optimizing networks to reduce delay to vehicles, but to sustainable modes, public transport, hail truck taxis, etc., and walking and cycling? So if we could get rid of cars off the road, which is something I stood up at a conference in London in '87 and made the same statement, then we wouldn't have the damage on the roads. So it's more of a comment.
Yeah, it was really. But okay, let me respond to some elements of it. If we add another 12 million people to the population of the country, it is implausible that we can all have exactly the same travel pattern that we do today. Right? Those 12 million can't all just adopt the travel patterns that we have today, or indeed, thinking about it, the travel patterns of pre-COVID 2019. So there will be changes, and to the extent that those people find themselves in, let's just say, more built-up areas, quite a lot of those people are going to be what I what I used to think of as old, and now there must be another phrase for it, but anyway, I intend to be one of them, who will have different demands and physically will find themselves in a different position. So there will be changes, if for that reason, if for no other. It is important, and I'm often reminded of this by the folks I work with here and at the Transport Technology Forum, that traffic is not just cars, that what you're engaging with is how we enable people to make the trips they need to make or would like to make, should make, by whatever mode makes most sense. So that's how I prefer to think about it. Generally speaking, it won't surprise you to know that I don't tend to say we should get rid of cars, because since about 1964, I personally have been fascinated by and a big fan of cars and motorbikes, and I don't want to not have them. But I do think we need a different mindset from the one. I'll just close on this then. So my dad, who's not with us anymore, but my dad, had he been able to, would have driven from the living room to the toilet. And the only reason I think he didn't do that is we lived in a first floor flat and he couldn't get the car up the stairs. That was his mindset. It was, we're going somewhere, well, we'll get in the car. What we need is a mindset that is, well, do I need to travel? Would I like to travel? And if I would like to travel, what's the best way of doing that? And I came here by train and I walked here from the hotel across the way. Eric, back to you.
Can I ask you to thank all our speakers? They've given us a great start.